The language beneath the surface. Most people believe that language is merely a tool used to communicate thoughts, a practical means of exchanging information. But what if language is more than communication? What if it is a mirror of the mind, a reflection of the soul, and an echo of everything you've ever experienced? Every word you speak, every pause you place, every tone you use carries meaning beyond the literal. When you open your mouth to speak, you're revealing more than facts. You're revealing the framework of your inner world. Consider this: your voice did not emerge in a vacuum. It was shaped by invisible forces long before you were aware of them. Your parents' voices, the language of your home, the tone used to praise you, the words used to correct you, all of these factors created the foundation of your speech. And as you grew, layers were added: your teachers, your peers, your culture, your media diet. Each interaction left a trace. Your speaking style is not an accident. It is the product of repetition, reaction, and adaptation. Some people speak quickly, afraid of being interrupted. Others speak slowly, choosing each word with care, perhaps shaped by environments where their words held weight. Even your vocabulary reveals something. Do you rely on soft, uncertain words like maybe or I guess? Or do you speak with assertive language like I believe and this is? These choices are not random. They are learned, often unconsciously, from the roles you were taught to play. And here lies the real insight. Most of us have never paused to ask why we speak the way we do. We focus on what we're saying, not how we're saying it. But your voice is a story. It tells the world who you are, whether you realize it or not. And when you begin to truly listen to it, you might discover it's been telling a version of your life all along, when you didn't know you were still living. 2. The psychological roots of how we speak. The way you speak is not just a product of your environment, it is a window into your psychology. From the perspective of depth psychology, speech patterns are not merely habits. They are reflections of inner structures, beliefs, fears, unresolved conflicts. Sigmund Freud once suggested that slips of the tongue reveal unconscious desires, but the truth goes even further. Even when we speak correctly, we leave clues about how we see ourselves, how we relate to others, and how we navigate the world. A person who constantly hedges their opinions with phrases like "I think," or maybe, may not be unsure of the facts. They may be protecting themselves from the vulnerability of being wrong. Someone who speaks quickly, rarely pausing, might not be impatient. They might be anxious about silence, afraid that any gap in speech could be filled by judgment. These subtle cues are not random. They are survival strategies. They were developed in moments when being precise, careful, or agreeable helped us avoid conflict, punishment, or rejection. Our voice becomes a shield, an armor, or sometimes even a cage, and we carried it into every room without realizing it. But what's even more revealing is how speech reflects not only momentary emotions, but enduring self-perceptions. A confident person often uses deliberate pacing, even silence, because they're not rushing to prove themselves. Their tone is not defensive, it's anchored. On the other hand, someone who has learned to distrust their own voice might rush, over-explain, or minimize their ideas to seem less threatening. They've internalized the belief that their words hold less weight. And this belief often stems from early experiences, moments where being honest led to conflict, or speaking up led to shame. Over time, these moments solidify into unconscious scripts. We don't remember all the times we held our tongue, but our voice does. It remembers. It adapts. And if we don't become conscious of it, it keeps repeating those old stories. So if you want to understand your emotional life, your internal dynamics, your relationship with power, begin by listening to how you speak. Not just the words, but the rhythm, the energy, the permission you give yourself to be heard. 3. Rhythm, tone, and power of language reveals who we are. Then rhythm and tone reveal how we feel about who we are. These elements, often dismissed as mere delivery, are in fact central to how we express power, confidence, and emotional truth. Consider the difference between someone who speaks with a slow, steady rhythm and someone whose words tumble out quickly, overlapping, almost breathless. The former commands attention with presence, the latter chases it with urgency. This is not just performance, it's psychology in motion. When we're confident, our speech slows down. We allow silence to exist between thoughts. We trust our words to land. But when we feel insecure, we speed up, fill every space with sound, as if trying to outrun doubt. This is deeply human. We are wired to protect ourselves, and speech becomes one of our earliest defense mechanisms. As children, we learn that speaking too boldly might trigger ridicule, or that pausing too long might be interpreted as weakness. So we adapt. We speak quickly to avoid being cut off, softly to avoid being judged, or loudly to ensure we're not ignored. But in doing so, we lose something: the quiet authority that comes from intentionality. Tone adds another layer. It is the emotional fingerprint of speech, and it often says more than the words themselves. A simple sentence like "I'm fine" can mean radically different things depending on whether it's spoken with warmth, irritation, or detachment. And people don't just hear tone, they feel it. Neuroscience shows that tone activates parts of the brain linked to empathy and threat detection. That's why some people command a room without saying much, because their tone signals stability, presence, certainty. They speak not just with words, but with embodied conviction. And that kind of speech is magnetic. It draws people in not through volume, but through resonance. So if you want to shift how others experience your voice, don't start with vocabulary, start with rhythm. Start with tone. Ask yourself, do I rush or breathe? Do I speak from tension or from ground? Because these qualities don't just affect how others perceive you, they shape how you perceive yourself. 4 filler words and subconscious clues. We often overlook the smallest pieces of speech, those tiny, seemingly insignificant words like, and, But these so-called filler words are far more revealing than they appear. They're not just placeholders for thought, they are traces of uncertainty, vulnerability, and sometimes even emotional patterns we've carried for years. When someone frequently uses filler words, it might be easy to assume they're unsure of what they're saying. But psychology suggests something deeper. In many cases, filler words act as cognitive bridges. They give the brain time to organize thoughts, especially when one is trying to articulate something meaningful. They serve a purpose. But when these words dominate, they often point to an inner landscape filled with hesitation. A person who constantly buffers their sentences with qualifiers may be someone who's learned that clarity is risky, that saying something directly invites correction, disagreement, or rejection. So, their voice softens itself. Their sentences dilute. And all of this happens below conscious awareness. Think about how children adapt to avoid conflict. They change their tone. They pause more. They mimic safety. As adults, we don't lose those habits, we refine them. Filler words become camouflage, tools of emotional regulation, signals that we are thinking while trying not to reveal too much. But here's where it gets powerful: when you start noticing your own filler patterns. You're not just improving your speech, you're observing your relationship with your thoughts. Do you trust your words enough to let them stand on their own? Or do you feel compelled to cushion them? Do you fear silence, so you fill it? Or are you afraid of being too clear, too strong, too direct? These questions matter because speech is not neutral. It's not just what you say, it's what you permit yourself to say. And filler words are often the spaces where your subconscious tries to hide. But awareness changes everything. The moment you hear yourself reaching for like or just or, you've already begun the work of reclaiming intention. And intention is the beginning of true expression. 5. The echoes of upbringing. If you want to understand the roots of your voice, look no further than the first people who ever spoke to you. The way you communicate today, your tone, your vocabulary, your confidence or hesitation, was largely shaped before you could even form a memory. In the early years of life, we absorb language, not just as a tool for naming things, but as an emotional blueprint for how to exist in the world. Were you encouraged to speak your mind, to ask questions, to be loud and curious? Or were you taught subtly or explicitly that silence was safer, that obedience was rewarded, that expression invited punishment? These experiences don't disappear. They embed themselves in your nervous system, in the cadence of your sentences, in the reflexive way you choose your words. A child raised in a home filled with rich conversation where feelings were named and opinions respected, is likely to grow into an adult who speaks with ease and clarity. But a child raised in a household where voices were raised in anger or silenced in fear may grow into someone who second-guesses every sentence, someone whose voice carries the weight of permission ungranted. And yet, we rarely question this inheritance. We assume our communication style is simply who we are, not realizing it may be a reflection of who we were forced to be. Upbringing doesn't just shape vocabulary, it shapes voice. It determines whether you feel entitled to take up space in a conversation, whether you instinctively minimize your thoughts, or whether you speak with the quiet strength of someone who is heard early and often. And while we can't rewrite the past, we can become aware of its presence in our speech. Every hesitation, every softened opinion, every unconscious apology might be a trace of an earlier story, one where your voice had to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. But awareness is power. Because once you recognize where your patterns came from, you can begin to choose differently. You can begin, slowly, to speak not from the echoes of who you were, but from the truth of who you are becoming. 6 cultural imprints on speech culture does not only influence what we say, it shapes how we say it, why we say it, and when we choose silence instead. From the moment we are born, we are immersed in a world of norms and expectations that whisper rules into our voice. In Western cultures, especially those that prize individualism, directness is celebrated. To speak clearly, to assert an opinion, to stand out is often equated with confidence, strength, intelligence. But in many Eastern cultures, where harmony and interdependence are valued, indirect speech is not weakness, it is wisdom. Silence is not emptiness, it is respect. There, speaking too quickly, too loudly, or too bluntly is not considered powerful, it's disruptive. These differences go beyond etiquette. They sink into the very structure of how we form thoughts and how we feel about our voice. A person raised in a direct speaking culture may view indirect communication as evasive or unclear. Meanwhile, someone raised in a culture of subtlety may experience direct speech as rude or even aggressive. Neither is right or wrong, but both reveal something profound. Language is not universal, it is contextual. And yet, within any culture, there are microcultures, families, schools, professions, peer groups. Each one has its own speech code, its own unwritten rules. A lawyer speaks differently in court than at home. A teenager sounds one way in class and another with friends. This is called code switching, and it's a form of linguistic intelligence, a way of adapting to survive, belong, and be understood. But if you switch codes too often, if your voice becomes a shapeshifter in every setting, you may lose track of your authentic tone. You may forget what your voice sounds like when no one is watching. So ask yourself when you speak, are you expressing your truth, or are you adjusting your identity to match what's expected? Culture can shape us, but it doesn't have to define us. Because in every act of speech, we have a choice to conform or to clarify, to echo or to emerge. 7. The influence of social conditioning beyond culture lies something more subtle, more invisible, yet just as powerful social conditioning. These are the unspoken rules, the whispered expectations, the quiet pressures that shape how we use our voice based not on truth, but on identity. From a young age, we're taught how we're supposed to speak based on who we are, or more precisely, who society expects us to be. Gender plays a role. Studies show that women, on average, use more hedging language phrases like "I think, maybe," or "I'm not sure not" because they lack intelligence or certainty, but because society has conditioned them to soften their presence. To be assertive, but not too assertive. To be clear, but not confrontational. Meanwhile, men are often encouraged to speak with authority, to claim space, to eliminate doubt, even when doubt is present. This doesn't mean one group is more honest than the other. It means both have been taught to survive different rules. And the rules don't stop at gender. Class, profession, education, all of these shape the unwritten scripts we follow. A person raised in an elite academic environment may learn to speak in polished, nuanced ways that signal sophistication and power. Someone raised in a working-class setting may develop a speech style that is direct, fast, and efficient language sharpened for pragmatism, not performance. Both are valid. Both have wisdom, but both also carry burdens. Because social conditioning doesn't just teach you how to speak, it teaches you how to be heard. Or not. And the tragedy is that many people go through life believing their voice doesn't matter simply because they were never taught how to use it in a way that aligns with societal expectations. But here's the deeper truth. Your worth is not determined by how well your voice fits into a mold. It's measured by how honestly your voice reflects what's inside you. And no system, no class, no gender rulebook can take that truth away unless you let it. 8. Technology and the decline of authentic speech in the digital age. The way we speak is no longer shaped solely by our environment, our psychology, or our culture. It is increasingly shaped by technology. Our conversations now occur across screens more than across tables. We speak through text, through emojis, through short bursts of fragmented thoughts. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, this new rhythm begins to infiltrate our real voice. We begin to speak like we text: short, quick, efficient, edited. We use fewer pauses, fewer full expressions of thought. We begin to crave instant replies and lose patience for depth. In this shift, something essential is lost. Because authentic speech requires presence. It requires vulnerability. It requires the willingness to linger in ambiguity, to stumble through a thought, to find clarity not before we speak, but while we speak. Yet modern communication has no tolerance for slowness. Social media rewards brevity. Messaging platforms compress dialogue into rapid exchanges. Algorithms reward what grabs attention, not what reveals truth. And even our tools, autocomplete, predictive text, voice-to-text, begin to suggest our words for us. Over time, we internalize this automation. We begin to speak like the average, like the algorithm expects, not like the individual we are. This shift may seem trivial, but it is not. It is spiritual. Because every time you replace a raw thought with a pre-programmed phrase, you trade authenticity for efficiency. You silence a part of yourself to match the machine. And the more often you do this, the harder it becomes to recognize your original voice. But that voice is still there underneath the layers of habit and speed and noise. Reclaiming it doesn't require turning away from technology. It requires awareness. It requires choosing to slow down, to resist the urge to sound polished, to let your speech be messy, human, real. Because in a world where everyone sounds the same, your true voice, imperfect, unfiltered, alive, is the rarest thing of all. 9. Your voice shapes your identity. We often think that speech is a reflection of who we are, that we speak because we know ourselves. But what if the opposite is also true? What if the way you speak doesn't just reveal your identity, but actively shapes it? This is the foundation of self-perception theory, the idea that we come to understand ourselves by observing our own behavior. And speech is one of the most repeated, visible, and internalized behaviors we engage in. Your brain listens to you. When you say, "I'm not good at this," or "I always mess things up," even as a joke, your subconscious takes note. It doesn't question intention, it records repetition. And what you say becomes what you believe. Over time, a pattern of self-deprecating humor, of hesitation, of constantly downplaying your insights begins to form a new self-image, one that may be smaller than the truth. But the inverse is also real. When you speak with clarity, with ownership, with the subtle strength of someone who believes they belong in the conversation, you send yourself a different message. I have value. I can be heard. I deserve space. And this internal message begins to rewrite your external life. You start showing up differently. You're more likely to take risks, more likely to say no, more likely to speak when silence would once have felt safer. Your relationships shift. Your decisions shift. Because language is not just an output, it's a feedback loop. It moves from your mouth to your mind and back again. So the question becomes, what kind of person are you training yourself to be every time you open your mouth? Someone who doubts, apologizes, hesitates, or someone who honors what they think, what they feel, what they believe? The difference isn't in talent or intelligence, it's in tone. And tone is a choice. one you make every day. One that begins with awareness and ends in transformation. 10. Speak to create. Not just communicate those people, speak to be understood. But the truly powerful speak to create to shape reality, to influence belief, to transform both themselves and the world around them. Every time you speak, you're not just reporting who you are, you're reinforcing who you're becoming. Your words carry weight, not only because of how others hear them, but because of how you hear them. When you say, "I can't," your mind believes you. When you say, "I'm figuring it out," your mind believes that too. Language is not neutral. It is a choice, and every choice builds or breaks something within you. So what are you building? Are your words a home for your strength or a shelter for your fear? Do you speak from your center or from the edges of approval, performance, survival? We live in a world that is constantly trying to tell you what your voice should sound like, what tone is acceptable, what opinion is safe, what volume is appropriate. But none of that truly matters if your voice is no longer yours. Authentic speech is not about being loud or articulate or perfect, it's about being aligned. It's about speaking with intention instead of impulse, with clarity instead of habit. It's about letting your words rise from the place inside you that knows who you are and where you're going. So pause. Listen. Notice how you speak when no one's watching, when you're not trying to impress, when you're just telling the truth. That's the voice you return to. That's the voice you strengthen. And every time you choose it, you move closer to the life that voice was meant to create. If this message resonated with you, consider liking this video, sharing it with someone who needs to hear it, and leaving a comment about how your own voice has shaped your journey. And if you want more content like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on all notifications. Because your voice deserves to be heard, and so does your truth.